All right, finishing up part 2 of our 9.3 notes. We're just going to work these 4 problems. So if we're told that AD is 3 and DB is 9, we want to find CD and AC. And I'm going to label AC as Y. That way we're solving for X and then Y. So first of all, CD, is that a leg or an altitude? That is an altitude. So I'm going to use my altitude squared is equal to part times part formula. Let that focus. So x squared is equal to part times part. My two parts are 3 and 9. So that's 12, which means that x is equal to the square root of 12, which simplifies to 2 on the square root of 3. So that is the length of CD. Then AC is a leg, and so the formula I'm going to use there is leg squared is equal to part times hypotenuse. And so remember, the part we're using needs to be from the same side of our triangle. So if I'm solving for y, the part I'm using is going to be 3. So y squared is equal to 3 times. My hypotenuse is the sum of these two parts. So that's 12. 3 times 12 is 36. So y is the square root of 36, which is 6. So that is the length of AC. All right, moving on to number 2. If DB is 21 and AC is 10, find AD. So AD is a part, and I'm given the leg. So we're going to need to use our leg formula to find the missing part. So remember, leg squared is equal to part times hypotenuse. We know our leg this time, so that's going to be that 10 squared is equal to, the part is our unknown, and our hypotenuse is going to be this entire length, so the sum of x and 21. So x plus 21 is the hypotenuse. So we have to multiply that. So 100 is equal to, I have to distribute that x, and I now have a quadratic, but we know how to solve those. We just need to get everything on one side and factor. So I'm going to move the 100 over, and now I just need to factor. So I'm looking for factors of negative 100 that add to positive 21. And that's going to be positive 25 and negative 4. So if I solve that, I set each parentheses equal to 0. I get that x is 25, negative 25, and x is positive 4. And I cannot have a negative length. So this is an extraneous solution, and x equals 4 is the correct answer for AD. All right, moving on to number 3. We want to find x, y, and z. So you can actually go in any order for these. I'm just going to go in alphabetical order. So starting with x. X is an altitude. So I'm going to use my altitude formula. Altitude squared is equal to part times part. So x squared is equal to 15 times 6, which is 90. So x is going to be the square root of 90, which simplifies to 3 on the square root of 10. Then y is a leg. So I need to use my leg squared is equal to part times hypotenuse formula. So y squared is equal to, the part I need to use needs to come from the same side of the triangle. So I'm going to use 15. And my hypotenuse is the sum of these two segments, which is 15 plus 6, and that's going to be 21. So 15 times 21 is 315. So y is the square root of 315, which simplifies to 3 on the square root of 35. And last but not least, z is our other leg. So I'm going to use my leg formula again, but using the other part. I apologize, that should be z squared. And so z. All All right, so that square root of 126 did simplify to 3 on the square root of 14. And now we just need to solve number 4. We're looking for x and z. So x is a part. And in order to find the part, I can use my altitude formula because altitude squared is equal to part times part. I know my other part and I know my altitude. So our altitude is the square root of 6. So square root of 6 squared is going to be equal to part times part. And when we square a square root, we just get left with what's inside the radical. And so we find that x is equal to 2. Now once we know that x is 2, I can find z because for my leg, z is a leg, my leg formula, I have to know the hypotenuse. I need to know the whole length. So remember, leg squared is equal to part times hypotenuse. So z squared is equal to, I have to use that part from the same side, 2 times. The whole length is 5. So z squared is equal to 10, and z is the square root of 10. And that concludes our notes on 9.3.